The August 28th, 2024 Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Oh, you're hiding over there. We welcome back veteran Fred Rudisil to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we welcome back Reverend Keith Farr, who's going to lead us in the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Holy God, as we come together today, we are cognizant of the 275th anniversary of this county of York that we live in, the place that we call home, which is also home to a rich history and culture and resources and traditions. We are grateful for this place. We're grateful for the business that you are putting before us today, which will affect our legislation, our economy, and communities. We pray for our residents and elected officials, businesses and farms, schools and fire and police departments, our faith communities. We pray that your will would be made known for our lives and our joint living together. Especially today, we're mindful of those living in this enduring heat again. Grant us peace this day. Grant us wisdom and guidance that we may represent the great love that you have for all of creation and for all of humanity. In your name we pray.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the August 7th, 2024 Board of Commissioners meeting as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the Chief Clerk's report. Pass it over to Mr. Munski.
Thank you. I only have one item that I really want to talk about today. That is item number 16 on the agenda. This is a motion in front of you to approve a new collective bargaining agreement between the County of York and the union comprised of corrections officers in the prison, represented by the Teamsters. I'm proud of this. I'm proud to put it in front of you. The county and the corrections officers, as far as my knowledge, have not agreed on a collective bargaining agreement in about 20 years. So I think this is a very important moment. I think in the context of having also agreed with the prison counselors and the prison maintenance, none of those 3 unions have gone to arbitration, and I'm not sure that has ever happened in the past. I'm proud to put that in front of you. I appreciate the Teamsters and how they worked with us in negotiating this contract, and I encourage you to approve it.
Great.
That is all.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Munski? Okay. I will open it up to any public comment as it relates to items on the agenda. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to new business.
Madam President, I would move that we adopt items number 1 through 36 on today's agenda.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. There were no executive sessions since our last meeting. We do have a presentation today under other business, so I will welcome up John Fry from PFM Financial Advisors, and this is regarding an opportunity the county has to do a refunding of a bond. So, and John, I believe I have your presentation here.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Again, my name is John Fry from PFM Financial Advisors. I'm here with my colleague from PFM as well, Scott Shear, and from Raymond James is Lou Verdelli and Lauren Stadel. And we're here to provide the county with an update on a bond refunding. And it's very good news for the county as we're able to, what we're presenting to you today is the opportunity to refinance a portion of the county's bonds, basically going from higher interest rates to lower interest rates and saving over $1 million net to the county. So just a brief presentation on page 2, just on an interest rate chart to give you a little bit of a market update. We'll look at the bottom chart. This is representing the 10-year maturity of a AAA municipal bond index, just to show you a proxy of how municipal bonds have gone up and down over the last 2 years. You can see they peaked out in about October of 2023 and have then trended downward. They went back up a little bit in June of this year and again trended downward, and over the last couple of weeks have traded in a pretty tight trading range and a very attractive time to be borrowing for this refinancing. You may see in the market and certainly all over the news that the Fed is widely expected to cut short-term interest rates over the next several months. There's a lot of data to come out in between that period of time, which might drive the magnitude of those cuts and the speed of those cuts, but certainly they are telegraphing to the market that they will be lowering short-term interest rates, which is different than the bond rates that you'll be borrowing at that are longer term and have already priced in some of those market cuts. But we do feel it is a good time to be entering the market for the county. On page 3, just a summary of the opportunity. The candidates, we always, as their financing team, we're always looking at all the county's outstanding bonds for their eligibility to be refinanced. And the ones that we're focusing on here are the 2015A, 2015B, and the 2016A, all that have a call date on December 1 of this year, which means they're eligible to be refinanced. So that's why we're here with this opportunity, because of that call date. They also have higher interest rates. From the 2015As have between 4 and 5%. The 15Bs have between 3 and 5%, and the 16As about 5%. So that the total par amount that we're looking at is about $43.6 million. But as of right now, there's about a $10 million portion of the 2015Bs that are at that 3% rate, which might not make sense to refinance. So unless we see rates come down even further over the next month, we likely would leave some of the bonds still outstanding and keep monitoring them if we can refinance them later. So given that, we've run the numbers, and it's about the estimated refunding savings if you execute this refinancing would be about $1.4 million net present value savings to the county. That's after factoring in the cost of issuance, and that's net debt service savings. Again, 1.4 million PV savings. We've shown it in the bottom in the blue chart how we've shown the savings coming in with basically all the savings structured so that next year's budget would have about a $1.49 million lower debt service payment. So we'd be able to lock all this in before your budget for the 2025 year of about $1.5 million. So that's all net. That's all impacted for your next year's budget, and there'd be no extension of debt. Your final maturity of the existing bonds would stay the final maturity. So this is not an extension of debt. It's just a refinancing and lowering of debt service. And just to provide you with a timeline of when we can execute this financing, we understand you have a meeting next Wednesday where you could authorize the financing team to proceed. We've begun to get some of the documents ready, and so we're prepared for that. With that authorization to proceed, we'd also move forward with getting a new credit rating for the county on these bonds. You have excellent credit rating with Standard & Poor's of AA, which the county should be very proud of. And that would then allow us to then go with another rating call with S&P in mid-September. We'd receive that rating back, prepare all the final documents, and be back at your Wednesday, September 18th board meeting, where you would have the official board bond ordinance, maximum parameters, which would set the maximum par amount and the maximum interest rate, would then allow us, the financing team, to go price the bonds sometime the week after that. Likely, if everything's in order, we'd price the bonds, and that's when, so in this case, the week of September 23rd, that's when we'd have all the final numbers locked in and the savings locked in, all the interest rates, and we'd settle then kind of end of October, early November. So that's the current timeline. We've been monitoring this transaction for a long time. It's a great opportunity for the county, and I know that the team's ready to go and are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for John?
I might ask one, and thanks for all the information. This is a lot of good information for us, and anytime we can save money, that's a good thing. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but is there any history of the timing of the issuance and with the presidential election and the Fed and things like that? or it's better to take something in hand right now and move forward?
But no, it's a great question, Commissioner Hoke. I mean, with the election coming up, there's certainly a lot of issuers across the country that are trying to stay out of issuing bonds at the very end of October and the beginning of November because of the potential volatility in the market. So we are trying to get in ahead of that, as well as, I think the Fed has anticipated that they might cut interest rates at their September meeting and November and December meeting. I think that's largely priced in. There's a jobs report that comes out early September that could impact the tone and the magnitude of the cuts. But we do feel that given the call date of December 1st and where the market is, we should go and execute this, because every day after December 1st, that's the call date. Every day after that, you would start, if rates stay the same, the savings start to come down because you'd be continuing to pay that higher interest rate.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Thank you so much for coming today. Much
Great, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
The only other thing I wanted to mention under other business, I did highlight the other week and thanking Abby Gibb and Colleen Igo for their help planning the 275th, a lot of behind-the-scenes work. I also want to make sure that we highlight our great facilities team and our great IT team, because they also, those two departments, work diligently and tirelessly behind the scenes to help pull off the events of the past weekend. So I want to make sure that we appropriately acknowledge our IT staff and our facilities staff for their behind-the-scenes help. I'll open it up for any public comment. Hearing and seeing none, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to Salary Board.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the August 7th, 2024 Salary Board meeting as submitted.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I will open it up for any public comment related to items on the agenda. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the position salaries, hours of work, and fringe benefits as provided by existing collective bargaining agreements or as set forth in the York County Employee Handbook or York County Policy Manual for the following departments and row offices as stated below, with no additional benefits or concessions as otherwise noted and there is listed in the agenda.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There were no executive sessions since our last meeting. I will open it up for any public comment. Hearing and seeing none, I can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned, and we will move on to Retirement Board.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 17th, 2024 Retirement Board meeting as submitted.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I will open it up for public comment related to items on the agenda. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to new business.
I make a motion to ratify the following individuals on the monthly annuity payment list as listed below: Yolanda Atwater, Prison; Kimberly Clark, Prison; Teresa Callahan, CYF; Michael Cutie, Prison; William Ellahausen, IT; Richard Enterline, MHIDD; Julie Harsh, Voters; Elizabeth Pierce, Aging; William Powell Jr., Prison.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I make a motion to ratify the following individuals for a vested retirement on the monthly annuity payment list as listed below: Eva Silsevsky, CYF; Amy Flood, CYF; Beth Williams, PANRAC; Percy Wilson Jr., MHIDD; Kevin Wingard, PANRAC.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have two guests with us today. So first up is Greg Stump, who is the Chief Actuary of Boomershine Consulting Group, who will present our valuation report.
you.
Greg, do I have your presentation on a? Greg, do we have yours electronically?
I sent to Sasha and Greg. I don't know if you got it. There it is, yes. Okay, so I'm going to keep my comments brief today, but I certainly want to answer any questions anyone has here. Part of the reason to keep things short is not a whole lot changed from one year to the next. You know, in evaluation, we just kind of compare what happened in the last year and how that changes the future outlook. But it didn't really change. Changed it a little bit for the better, actually. So I'll go over the evaluation results. On page 4, there is kind of just a high-level summary of all the figures that are in the full reports. If you want any more details on this, there's a 20 to 30-page report for each one of these plans. But here are the key numbers. Funding ratio for the retirement system, 88%. It was about that last year. Retiree healthcare, 45%. That's going to keep improving. And cost of the plan, $14.3 million for the retirement system, $5.4 million for retiree healthcare. Both similar numbers to what we had in the last valuation. The populations of the plans on the next page, just kind of a summary of what happened during 2023. And keep in mind, this is all as of January 1. So that's the only time we look at it. So we're not, you know, keeping track of what happened in the first quarter, second quarter. It's just one snapshot date per year. So during 2023, there were 213 terminations, 59 retirements, 50 deaths. You see that compared to the prior year, all pretty much in line, except there were more terminations in 2022. That was a little bit of an outlier. It was a higher turnover year for the county. But all the numbers in 2023 are pretty much what we would expect, including the number of new employees. Population pretty stable, age 43 with 10 years of service, that stays stable over time, which is good for pension funding. And for retiree healthcare, it's a closed group. It's been closed for a long time, meaning no new employees are going into that. In fact, there are only 8 employees left as of January 1, maybe fewer right now, but 500 and some retirees. The asset smoothing picture is the number one thing that's going to impact costs going forward. So I'll tie this into the projections in a minute, but how this works is every year, and they fall off after 5 years, but every year we measure a gain or a loss. It's versus the expected return. So it's not versus 0. It's, 2% return, that's still a loss because it's less than expected. So there were gains in every year except for 2022. The net on the right is a gain, almost $40 million total for those 5 years. But the amount unrecognized in the orange is a little bit of a loss. And that's mostly because 2022 is more recent than 3 of those gain years, so we still have 3 more slices to recognize. There's no orange bar on 2019. That just means that it's all been fully recognized. It's worked into the cost now. But the other ones, you recognize one piece at a time, and that's going to affect the funding. So the last part of this is the funding and the future outlook. We'll look at each plan separately. And on page 8, we see the expected funding progress of the retirement system. And what we're looking at is a 20-year projection starting January 1, 2024, going out 20 years. The red line is the expected unfunded liability, and the blue bar is the expected funding ratio, expected being the key word, because the actual will not be these numbers. It's a moving target. So we do see that unfunded liability just increase for a few more years, and that is a direct result of that 2022 loss, which, by the way, was actually not as severe as it was for a lot of my other similar-sized clients. So I think, this board did a good job of protecting some of that downside. And Lee will talk a little bit more about that. But the funding ratio expected to stay hovering pretty close to 90%. Most of the plans that are in this type of situation that I'm working with right now, they have it dropping down a little more because 2022 was more of a severe loss for them. But we're expected to stay in the 90% range and improve to 100% over time. And that's always going to be the case, no matter what the gains and losses are. The next page shows a projected contribution over the same time period. There's a lot of things on this page, but I'll explain each one briefly. The blue bar is the normal cost. Every active employee is accruing a benefit, so there is going to be a normal cost. It does increase over time because the benefit's a percentage of pay, the cost is a percentage of pay, so that those things go up. The amortization payment is just to get you from 88% to 100%. So that's why there are red bars, and that's why there is no red bar at the end, because that's when you're already 100%. There's no amortization payment. The dotted line is just kind of to view things in today's dollars. You know, even when it looks like it's increasing, in today's dollars, it's kind of decreasing over time. And then there's a short-term budget projection there. And again, the increase is because of the unrecognized loss from 2022. And same type of graphs for the OPEB, AKA Retiree Healthcare Fund, improving from 45% to 100% over a relatively short time frame. That's just a function of how we amortize the unfunded liability, which is shown on the next page. And the blue bars are there, but they're so small because there's only 8 employees that you can't even see them. So the entire cost essentially is that amortization payment. There is no asset smoothing for this fund because at 45% funded, it really doesn't make a difference. When we get to the 80% range, somewhere around there, we will talk about asset smoothing for this. So that'll be in a few years. But for now, it's just, you know, $5 to $5.5 million, you know, for a decade. So that is all I have for you. There's some comments on the conclusions page, but I think I've mentioned those already. So any questions?
Questions for Greg? Thank you so much. Okay, welcome back, Lee.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Good morning.
It's going to be known as NVIDIA Earnings Day.
Yeah.
Do I have your stuff? Do I have your presentation?
I sent it yesterday, isn't it?
Did you load his presentation?
I know Rebecca was on it, and the one always sent it.
I think it went to Rebecca. It went to Rebecca.
I'll go take care of that. Go ahead and start. We'll get that. Yeah.
And how long did you want to take today? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Well, Greg did. It's awesome.
Right.
Oh,
He set the bar really high.
I will say, you know, even though it's brief here, on Monday we had a deep hour-long discussion, you know, with Philo, your sub-investment group. So today what I'm presenting is more of a shorter version, you know, just more the highlights for you. But feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions, you know, regarding your pool. If you just go to tab 2, we'll just cover a couple of pages of the market environment. And on the first page of that, which is page 10, as you can see here, GDP did pick up, surprisingly really, in Q2, up 2.8%, really on the back of an upturn in inventory investment with, you know, most businesses believing the Fed are going to soft land this and started to rebuild the shelves. And there was an uptick in consumer spending again, although really, as you can see in a minute, sort of the last hurrah, folks spending that stimulus money. But when you look under the hood, it's really become bifurcated here within the US, whereas large companies and higher income households are doing far much better than smaller companies and lower income households. And that's really down to 2 things. One is just cost of debt, and the cost of debt, obviously smaller companies need to borrow more money, they're more levered, so that's a bit of a headwind for those firms. And then for households, obviously inflation is like a tax on goods. And so, you know, that obviously is more impactful for those that have less disposable income. But we have started to see, as you look under the hood from the credit markets at the bottom of page 10 there, you are starting to see delinquencies, particularly in the lower income households, within credit cards, auto loans. And we do expect that to maybe continue through the rest of this year. Just go to the PowerPoint.
This one? Is that it?
I don't think you have the right drive yet.
I didn't name it that.
Oh, you didn't name it that. Okay, let's try this.
You know what? I brought one with me as a backup.
Yeah.
All right, we found it. Great. Thanks for your patience.
And this is even shorter than this book. So I was basically on the first page of the market environment, which is there. So I just wrapped up that. So on the next page, and just like what we, talked about bifurcation in the economy, what also we're seeing now is a slowdown in the labor market. At the end of June, unemployment did tick up to 4.1% from 3.5%, 12 months previously. And then again, as you saw right at the beginning of August, we had a pretty poor labor number come in, unemployment up to 4.3%. That caused a significant sell-off, particularly within the big tech part of the market. So going forward, we do expect that kind of softening to continue a little bit, and it's why the Fed finally came out, Powell, Jackson Hole, over the last couple of days, and stated they will begin, and you heard that from John a few minutes ago, they will start beginning their taking rates down, starting with the September meeting. The market is priced in about 3 cuts for this year already, potentially 25 bips September, November, December, and then another 5 cuts next year. So all in total, about 8 cuts are priced into the market. That brings us down to a terminal rate at the end of about 3.25% to 3.5%. So it's still a lot higher than what you've seen post-GFC. It's back to more what you've seen traditionally over the long term. And if you could just go forward one more page, we'll finish on this. Sorry, just show you some index returns for the quarter. And, no surprise when the GDP is strong, we have growth here in the US, global equities do well. And but when you look under the hood of global equities, it's really come down to just a few names. And actually 60% of the S&P 500's return over the past 12 months is down to 5 names. Mm-hmm. So at the end of June, you heard like S&P is at a 52-week high. When you look under the hood, almost all the companies were in the S&P are actually at 52-week lows. It's just the big rise of the NVIDIAs and the big tech there. And what you've seen since Q3 is a bit of a reversal of that. The market's starting to broaden now. Smaller companies are doing much better now and outperform considerably in July. You'll see that in your July update in the book. And, fixed income is doing much better now as the market is pricing in rate cuts. And then if you just look at the middle of that page, bonds were barely positive for the quarter. It's because rates did back up slightly in Q2. So that's a headwind for bonds. But your sub-investment grade, your short-term credit, you can see there did much better, bank loans and high-yield bonds. And then finally at the bottom, because we did have an uptick in rates again, that's a bit of a headwind for those real assets, commodities, listed infra, real estate. But as you can see, infra was still positive because it's a far better asset class of being able to pass on the impact of higher rates in the quarter, unlike real estate, where you have to wait until you got that new contract that you write for the rent, which, you've got to wait maybe 5-10 years before that comes up again. So more difficult to pass on that rate increase. Any questions on the market? If not, we'll just go to the OBS page. And if you want, for time, if you try and be as quick as Greg, I'll just stick with the OBS page. I'm going to show you one new page I did put in this that I think will be useful to see for you. You ended the quarter $555 million. As you saw this week, you're now over $570 million. So I think that's the highest we've ever seen the fund.
I think it was.
Great.
It is.
Bearing in mind, remember, you do take a lot of money out the fund as well. So it's not purely all
Right,
growth.
yeah.
You have to overcome that deficit there. Returned a little over 1 for the quarter. A bit behind your policy, as you would expect. It was that mega tech that really ran, and you're underweight that. But because you're so well diversified, you're still in that top third, 36% of funds for that quarter. You're never going to be at the top, you're never going to be at the bottom because you're more diversified. Emerging markets did much better for you. We did add an active new manager there, which added 5.5% straight off the bat first quarter for you. Defensive equity, folks are buying that VRP, that insurance, those options just for protection, not knowing where the markets are going to go. That's been accretive. And that short-term credit in light of rates backing up. What was a bit of a headwind was those interest rate sensitive areas, financials, et cetera. Think of them as value stocks, and then smaller cap equities. They said in my market environment note, in Q3, you've seen that reverse, with small caps now outperforming large caps, value now outperforming growth. Again, which is why you have a mix of everything in your portfolio. Over the past 3 years, you've made a little over 4%, and that's done much better than most because of that great protection you had in 2022 that Greg alluded to, which is why, even though it's only 4.5%, you're in the top 12% of all public funds, because you didn't dig such a big hole on the downside in that year. And then that means then longer term, you're well above assumed rate of return. You can see over 8%, and that leaves you in the top quartile. So that's well above, if you just indexed everything, that's that benchmark return there. But more importantly, it's quite a bit above your assumed rate of return, which is why you've seen your funding improve. And the one thing, although that 2022 was negative, you saw on Greg's chart, all those other years were positive. And as you sit here today, you're above your assumed rate of return already for this year too. So potentially, even if we go in flat for the remainder of the year, you potentially have a few gains this year as well, which can help going forward. Just a couple of changes. I talked about the international change we made during the quarter. We are still getting that real estate and timber farmland money in. Real estate's coming in a lot quicker. You are quite a bit underweight that asset class target now. That's obviously beneficial in an asset class that's had a few struggles to now be underweight it because you were proactive to start receiving money 2 years ago out of that asset class. We were able to lower some fees for your managers, partners, and actually even Sigler Guff, their private equity now, they're managing it for just 50 basis points. Normally when you hear private markets, it's 2 and 20. They're managing now 50 basis points. It's more in line with what public equities are. And from the one page I just want to show you on this, if you go forward just a couple of pages, one more, there we go. So just as a reminder, and it kind of meshes with what you saw with Greg's data, is from an IPS point of view, you're invested in those broad indices on the outside, on the left there. And you expect to get about 7.2% over the next 10 years. So that's north of your assumed rate of return, so that is good. With a volatility just a little over 9. How you've invested this fund, though, it's been a lot more diversified relative to that, more defensive in its stature as well. So because of that, you do give up a tiny bit in return. You can see that drops about 4 basis points. But more importantly, look at that assumed risk, 8.43. It drops around 7%. And that is why your highs are not as high and your lows are not as low. Because remember, what you're trying to do at this point is hit that assumed rate of return every year with as little variability around it as you can. Then that keeps a more consistent ADC payment for you, makes it a lot easier from a budgeting point of view, rather than getting these wild fluctuations year by year. So that's the beauty. As your fund has grown, you're now being able to diversify that pool to really manage that downside and that volatility. So that wraps up the pension fund. As I say, you've got a lot of managers there. I won't go through them all today, but feel free to reach back out if you have a question on them. But any questions on the pension fund? If not, if you go forward a couple of pages, you'll see the obs for the OPEB fund. And as you've heard Greg say at this point, it's obviously close to new entrants. At some point, this fund will be like a target date fund, will kind of glide path it out. You're a long way away from that because there's still some actives putting into the fund at this point, but eventually it will be all retirees, and what you're looking to do then is create a glide path to basically, so those assets are run out, you know, right through the last person there. So this fund is really more of a investment pool where money just goes in and it's left to grow. As a reminder, there's only a couple of counties that actually have a pool. Most of them just pay year by year. And because of that, you can see on this page, with the extra $2 million you've made, you can see there you're just over $40 million end of June. You've had another $2 million in gains this quarter. So in total, since you've funded this, over $15 million you've had in gains that you've not now got to go to the general fund or the taxpayer to go and pay. So it's been very prudent for you to recognize the liability and actually fund it. And now you're having to, because of the GASB 7475, you're having to put those on your financials. It shows you're doing the right thing. That helps when you have bond, you know, when the bond rating agencies come in, you're going to get a higher bond rating agency, you know, higher rating because you're doing the right thing. Similar things work well for you in this pool, where it says Core Plus. That is the plus sectors. That's that sub-investment grade you see, sort of like bank loans and high yield. That portion of it did far better in a rising rate environment. That's the only difference you see to the pension fund. And then similar kind of things were headwinds last quarter. And as I often say, quarter to quarter, you have seen that reverse, made over 7%. Importantly, because it's a smaller fund, this has a little bit more indexing within it, so your fees are a lot lower. You're only 33 basis points. We don't recommend any changes for the moment on this pool, but as I say, you know, over the next few years, we'll kind of look at it and do an asset liability study. And as I said, at some point, we would look to kind of glide. You'll take the foot off the gas as, you know, folks are more, as you get more and more retirees towards the end of life. You'll become more fixed income in this portfolio. Any questions on OPEB? Not. If you go forward a couple of pages, we'll just finish on your 457. And we'll just hit the obs on here. You're now over 30 million in this, which again is another mark, I think, for the first time that we've seen, which is great. As you well know, and you can see on the bottom right chart there, the allocations by asset class. Over 2/3 of folks are in the target date funds, where they naturally, progressively glide out over time. Employees should probably be. If you don't follow the markets, don't understand the markets, or you don't have time like I do, invest in the target date fund. What is interesting with your fund compared to a lot of other county funds is when you look at those other investments outside of target dates, the investments into the individual funds, you have a lot more equity actually than most folks. You're at about an 80-20. Most plans we see are around about 60-65 of equities. So, you know, maybe some of that is because of all the higher equity returns that we're seeing. You know, folks are obviously tilted more their equities. And, you know, obviously that's really helping folks grow their asset pools quicker by having that overweight to equities. From your fund point of view, you can see 3/4 of your funds have outperformed over the past year. All of them have over the 10-year period. And fees, extremely low, 11 basis points for your investment. And then finally, if you just go to the next page, this is the last page. From the trend, the engagement point of view, we are starting to see a bit of an uptick. I'm not sure, particularly in that top left. See the participant rate? It's jumped quite a lot over the last year, almost doubled. Not sure what that's accounted for, new folks. You know, started putting into the plan. But on top of that, even contributions, folks are starting to put a bit more money in. As you can see, quarter by quarter, you're now up what was a couple of years ago about 6.5%, and now 7.5% has been contributed into the plan. Maybe they have a few more folks getting towards retirement age, are just looking to, put some more money in, in the last couple of years. Because those contributing over 10% has gone up quite a bit. And that tends to be those folks that are later on, closer to retirement that start to do that. So just some demographics. You probably have not probably, you will have a better idea why you're seeing some of those trends. But that's good to see, and that is healthy for the fund. And, as the fund grows over time, you get a bit more scale. You can go back to some of the providers there, then Power, et cetera, try and get that, get that fee down even more. Any questions?
Questions for Lee? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you taking your time to come in today. An executive session of the Retirement Board was held on August 21st, 2024, for personnel matters related to retirement allocations. I will open it up for any public comment. Hearing and seeing none, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy one of the last few days of summer.
We try to get, yeah.